Hi everyone, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. In the 2024, I recommend you to learn what are the shapes best fit for your wine. What are the difference between Australian and South African wine? What are those hidden gems that you can try from those countries? Watch this video and you will learn this. Hi Mike.
Hi, Alexei.
Hi. As a short introduction, we know with Mike each other for quite many years and meet each other in IBM when Mike was executives and I was reportee of the Mike. And the Mike was one of the key people who opened for me the wines. We have a couple of degustation, which was new to me, and I have a chance to learn a bit from Mike. And now the main idea to share Mike experience in the wine tastes, and we want to share about of basics things for someone, but maybe not basics for the rest. It's also about what glasses exist in the for the wine degustating, what you can use. So, Mike, let's start with the wine glasses, right?
Well, actually, Alexei, let me make a suggestion before we get into the
Mm-hmm.
classes. Maybe I'll just provide a little bit of introduction to myself. So
Yeah.
yes, we have known each other for many years. I left IBM about 10 years ago, but I remember having some great experiences in Bratislava trying Slovakian wine and was actually blown away by how good the wines were. I've been very fortunate in that I was introduced to wine at a very young age. You know, my father, who is now 91, is still very passionate about wine and had a wine cellar of his own. And probably from about the age of 12, gave me the opportunity to have a glass of wine with dinner. And he didn't have to do that. And I suppose some parents would shun him and worry about giving someone at 12 years of age a glass of wine. But actually, I thought it was a great way to introduce someone to one of life's great pleasures. And I got the bug, and I really fell in love with wine very quickly. And then from probably about the age of 18, I was already starting to buy wine on my own. And there was a section in Dad's cellar that I could use. So I would, probably after a year or two, I had a couple of hundred bottles of my own wine. And I haven't looked back since. And I've had the opportunity to visit to many countries and many wine regions around the world, really to extend my understanding and appreciation of wine. And that continues today. I've got a vast cellar with wines, okay, predominantly from Australia because I live here in Sydney, but I have wines from all over the world. I'm a great lover of French champagne. I love New Zealand Pinot. I think South African Chenin Blanc and South African Sauvignon Blanc are absolutely outstanding. The reality is there's just so many great wines to enjoy around the world. I don't think I'll have an opportunity to taste everything, but anyway, I'm really glad to be here with you. You mentioned wine glasses. I suppose about 10, 15 years ago, I started getting introduced to the importance of glassware. Now, we always had nice wine glasses at home, but Riedel were a very big advocate for varietal specific wine glasses. And you can argue that maybe that's a little bit over the top, but I must say, in my own experience, there are certain wine glasses that are better than others in terms of their shape to be able to get the very best out of wine. So what I would say is as follows. Some of your viewers might say, oh, wine glasses aren't particularly important, but think about, would you really want to drink wine out of a paper cup? The answer is no. Why? Well, because it's not a very pleasant experience. So let's take that a step further. You want to drink it out of a water tumbler. Well, it's better than a paper cup, but it's still not quite doing the wine justice. So the next thought about it is what's nice to put to your tongue and to your lips when you taste a glass of wine. And in my view is you want something that's thin and inviting. So thin glassware is very important. Lightweight glassware is very important, but also the shape. So I'll give you an example. And as I said, I'm a very big advocate for Riedel, but there are a number of other brands that do great jobs. So this
by the way, Mike, I was never, so I tried to find something which will be substitution of Riedel, but I don't know openly. Whatever I tried, I came back to Riedel. So I have only Riedel glasses in my home now.
Well, look, you made a great choice. There are a small number of other wine manufacturers that do a very good job, but I think Riedel is probably by far the biggest in terms of high quality wine glasses. So I've actually got 4 here that I wanted to share with you. Now, this one I use actually every day, but this is the Riedel Varietals champagne glass. Now, most people would say, well, where's the flute? Well, the issue with a flute glass is that you really can't bring your nose into the wine. So it might be functional at a party, but if you're drinking a fine champagne, you want to drink a wine where you can really put your nose in and experience the bouquet and also a little bit of that effervescence. And actually, I find this is a terrific everyday glass as well. So whether it's Riesling or even Chardonnay or Semillon, I use this on a daily basis as well. But there are other wine glasses that I think are superb. This is the Riedel Veritas Old World Pinot glass. And it looks a little bit like a brandy balloon. Maybe that's where they got the inspiration from, but this is a superb wine to not only experience the bouquet, but also to see the color. And by having quite a wide mouth, it allows the bouquet and the wine to open up as you're sipping it. The third one is the Riedel Veritas Old World Syrah glass, which is my go-to wine glass for either Cabernet or Syrah or Shiraz. And this is, again, a beautiful bowl. It allows you to put your nose directly into it. They're lightweight, they're a beautiful stem, and they are lovely to hold. And then the fourth one is a Chardonnay glass. Now, I don't use this one too often, but Chardonnay, because it's very aromatic, is designed to have a very wide bowl. And so this is ideally suited to highly aromatic wines. So those are my 4 wine glasses that I like to use when I'm drinking wine. So let me pause there.
Would you use like those for the whites only, or you can drink reds from it as well?
Well, these 2 are for red, and these 2 are for white.
Because Chardonnay looks like wide enough for the red as well, right?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, you could use this as a red wine glass, but that's a classic Chardonnay glass, right? And the reality is, when we have large parties, actually we serve the champagne in flutes. And the only reason is there's a limit to how many of these you can put in the dishwasher, whereas you can put a lot more flutes. So it's more like it's function over form.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. So what else?
By the way, on the glass, the interesting point, we have a debate about it as well. So when you wash the glass, it's usually have these small spots on it. So if you're a really picky person, you will take the new glass after being washed. You will see the small, parts in it. And basically, one of my friends from winemaking, they just use some stuff to take it manually. And so, do you have this issue, or you never noticed? It's so picky.
Look, we always wash our glasses in the dishwasher, and as long as you've got rinse aid, I think it's fine. And when they come out of the dishwasher, I hang them upside down, so I'll put them like that onto a special dishcloth, and within about an hour, if there is any residual, it's already drained off and they're fine to go. But I mean, there's nothing stopping you from polishing the glass by hand. But golden rule is if you're going to polish a glass, you don't hold it by the stem. You hold it
Hmm.
this way and then you do this because you're putting a huge amount of pressure on the weakest point of
Hmm.
the glass if you do it there. But if you hold the base and do it, you'll make sure that the glass doesn't break.
That's a good hint. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So moving forward with more of your personal story with wines, maybe you tell how you start to be the wine lover, but you already told at the beginning that it was a great influence of your father. So if something can be added there, will be nice. Uh, but interesting to see as you started to know wine quite early, how it's developed through the years, how it's what was this in your life, you know, how it was linked with the friendship, business, whatever, you know.
Well, that's a good question. Look, whether it's wine or beer or whether it's a spirit, I think a drink always goes well with business over dinner or a lunch. So it's an essential part of it. But the other part of that really is you want to make sure you're drinking good wine. That doesn't mean you have to spend a fortune. It just means you need to have some appreciation when you look at a wine list that you can identify very good wines. And really from my own experience, I mean, I can afford very expensive wines at restaurants, but I generally don't. What I do is I go through the wine list and I pick wines that I think deliver outstanding price performance. I don't know what it's like in Bratislava, but in Australia, bottles of wine at a restaurant can often start at $100 a bottle. And if you want to go for really top shelf, well, you could easily spend $200, $300, $400, $500. And the question is, do you really want to do that? My view is no. So I think the great thing about going to a restaurant is identifying those wines that are sort of running under the radar, which deliver outstanding value and outstanding flavor, but they don't break the bank. So that comes with experience. And I know that when we go out for dinner with friends, I'm invariably asked to pick the wines. Okay, so they know I like wine, but they also know, you know, I'll pick a good wine and I won't send them broke.
You know, exactly talking about why this channel was created, like Wine Hidden Gems is about to find great price quality things, not that much promoted. And as you said, for me, it's usually the same, not only about wines, about everything in the life. If you go to the 5 stars hotel somewhere, you think about 5 stars service, exceptional. Then you can find some cozy 3+ stars hotel with amazing family atmosphere, and then you think it was much better. The experience was amazing comparing to the 5 stars that your expectation was very high. The same for the wines. I myself I drank quite a lot of the wines in my friends' houses or whatever, which was above €100 for the bottle. And then I was like starting to think, but I'm drinking not significantly better than 10 or I told you that in Slovakia and in the neighborhood Austria, we have amazing wines for the 15. Amazing, I'm saying that you already taste the wine after the oak barrels, and it's a lot of flavor, a lot of Chardonnay type of that here. And for 5 to 6, it is very drinkable for the parties, etc. You can find a lot like here. By the way, which I'm less finding in neighborhood Italy, means like the Venetian coast, let's say, so wines. Garda Lake and those districts start to offer you much more, I would say. But then I realized that in Austria, especially, it's amazing price quality. But sorry, I'm starting to talk about this region.
I agree. You know, my premise always is price performance, price value. So yes, I've got some expensive wines in the cellar, but I read a lot. I look through all of the reviews. I'm very very close friends with a number of wine critics here in Australia as well as in South Africa, and they're always giving me their viewpoints on wines. So I'm using that to make, I suppose, an informed and educated decision on what wines I buy. But most of my wine is sitting somewhere between $20 and $50 Australian a bottle. And in that range, you can get some outstanding wines. And there are always bargains, even less than $20. But between 20 and 50, there's an abundant choice. You know, there are exceptions in some countries like California, in particular, are very expensive wines, and there are obviously some of the Bordeaux in France that are very expensive. But look, there are billions, if not trillions, of liters of wine made every year that don't cost an arm and a leg. So you just got to, I suppose, learn from experience. And I've probably got 6 feet worth of books that I refer to, and I subscribe to maybe 20 or 30 online wine retailers who are continually sending emails, but they're also accompanying those with reviews of critics. And you use those as informed information to then make an informed decision. And I'd say 99% of the time, those decisions, when the wine actually arrives, I'm very happy with.
Okay, and coming back to our starting point, still, do you have any great story which you can share about how wine changed you or life or business relationship or whatever?
I suppose 2 stories. I'll talk about the second one, which would be about how I got interested in South Africa. The first one was when I first met my wife. So we were going through university together, and we worked actually at Pizza Hut, and we started dating. And my wife was not a wine drinker. In fact, her idea of a good wine was something nice and sweet. And here she is, she's exposed to someone who's passionate about wine. And there was a bit of a learning process for her to go through. But she now enjoys wine just as much as I do. She doesn't necessarily get herself involved in the purchasing of the wine, but she thoroughly enjoys wine. And for the 2 of us, we always like to enjoy a bottle of wine with dinner. So it's good when you can take something as, I suppose, humble as a bottle of wine and make it part of a dinner experience or a luncheon experience, and you both appreciate it. Now, in terms of my experience with South Africa, when I was working with IBM in the growth markets unit, South Africa that was Middle East Africa, and in particular, South Africa was part of the region that I led. And I knew that South Africa made wine, but honestly, 15 years ago, I'd never had a bottle of South African wine. So I was very intrigued. So I had some opportunities, although the business site was in Johannesburg and all of the vineyards are in Cape Town, I had the opportunity to take some weekends and travel to Cape Town and try the wines. And it's not just that the standard of the wines were outstanding, but it also is one of the few wine regions in the world that seems to have an innate ability to combine great wine with great restaurants, fantastic architecture, breathtaking scenery, and terrific places to stay. So if you ever wanted to go on a wine expedition over multiple days and enjoy the very best in all of those aspects, the Cape Town wine region or the Cape Winelands is very hard to beat on a global scale. In fact, in terms of the experience that I had in the Cape Winelands, it's better than anything I've had in any other wine region in the world. And I've been to a lot. The issue really with South Africa is, it has some economic challenges, it has some social challenges. The wines have historically been seen as cheap and cheerful. And the reality is their best wines or even their mid-level wines are every bit as good as what the rest of the world produces. And they produce a couple of very unique varietals. One of them is Chenin Blanc. Now, there are many places around the world that produce Chenin Blanc, but actually South Africa has the largest plantings of Chenin Blanc in the world, much bigger than France, which is the origin of Chenin Blanc. And I've actually got three here that I wanted to just talk about very briefly, and I'll bring them up to the camera in a moment. But Chenin Blanc is a very versatile grape. It's probably the most versatile white wine grape there is. And I say that because you can make it as a dry still wine, you can make it as a sweet still wine, and you can make it as a sparkling. So Vouvray, I'm sure you're familiar with Vouvray that comes out of France. That's sparkling Chenin Blanc. Okay, and a lot of dessert wines are also made out of Chenin Blanc. But the thing that stands out in South Africa are their dry Chenin Blancs. And for me, this is the greatest Chenin Blanc in the world, which is De Morganson, which is grown in Stellenbosch. And Stellenbosch is probably the most famous wine region in South Africa. But I just want you to look at the label at the top, just to give you an idea of how highly regarded that is. So you may be familiar with the IWSC decanter show that happens every year. That is where wines and vineyards from across the world, thousands of entries are made. And then over a period, I think it's about 10 days or 14 days, they go through all the classes and they award trophies, gold, silver, etc. And this is the 2015 Chenin Blanc. And that won the trophy and gold for the best Chenin Blanc in the world. And it's thoroughly deserved. And you can see that's 2015. That also tells you another aspect of these wines. They age beautifully. In fact, as they get older, they get better. They probably have a shelf life of about, I'd say 10 to 15 years. There's a couple of others that, this one comes from Cedarburg, and Cedarburg is in a high altitude area in the Cedarburg wine region, but that's also another sensational Chenin Blanc. And then the third one is Stellenroost, which comes from Stellenbosch, as also another fantastic producer of Chenin Blanc.
Those are not far from Cape Town, or it is variety.
So to go to Stellenbosch is just over an hour's drive from the heart of Cape Town. It's expressway. And it's it is the most famous wine region in South Africa, and for good reasons, because by and large, the best wines are made in an immersive cultural experience of restaurants and scenery and architecture. It's sublime. So that's about an hour, but essentially you can drive in any direction from Cape Town, any direction, for about 2 to 3 hours, and you will stumble across a wine region. In fact, there are 60 wine regions in the Cape Winelands, and they essentially run one after the other. And that's quite different to, for example, here in Australia, where you might have the Hunter Valley, or you'll have Yarra Valley, or you'll have Coonawarra, you'll have Margaret River. Those are standalone wine regions. These generally are reasonably small, but they continue and they become different wine regions. And then the other one that, the other thing that South Africa produces fantastic wines is Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc
one of my favorite tastes.
I love Sauvignon Blanc. Right? So you probably tried New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. We get it here all of the time. Australia makes Sauvignon Blanc, but they just have such a distinctive flavor, and they age particularly well. And I'm sure you would see a lot of South African Sauvignon Blanc in Europe including Slovakia. And those two are fantastic. They also have a very unique varietal called Pinotage. Pinotage is a hybrid grape. It was originally thought that it was going to be a hybrid of Pinot and Shiraz. That's why it was called Pinotage. But it turned out it was Pinot and Cinsault. Cinsault tends to be more of a blending grape rather than a standalone variety, and it became very difficult to create good wines. But after many years, they've finally mastered it. So South Africa make fantastic wines.
By the way, Pinotage, it is in my collection that, let's say, I am not an expert in South African wines, but if I see Pinotage, I think you will never lose. As I tried, I never lose. It's always a great fruity, sometimes smoky even wine. What I tried, not that many like you, but
yeah, you're absolutely right. In the hands of great winemakers, it's a fantastic wine, but it can be a bit of an assault on the palate if it's not made correctly. But South African winemakers are world class. The other thing South Africa does really well are Bordeaux blends. And we don't see that much Bordeaux blends in Australia or New Zealand per se. But in South Africa, they're very happy to blend, the 5 noble grapes into wine. So you're familiar with Bordeaux blends? So Bordeaux
not really myself.
So Bordeaux blend it could be any of the following 5. It could be Cabernet, Petit Verdot, Merlot, trying to remember the other 2. There's 2 others. It'll come to me in a minute. But the idea of a Bordeaux blend is to take the best characteristics of each of those varietals and bring them together to create an even better wine than if they were just standalone. And it works to great effect. And that's why they call them Bordeaux blends, because that's where the art of blending began. So you might be saying, well, what's South Africa got to do with an Australian? Well, that was really the premise for me to decide to set up my own business called Luxury Wine Trails, which was all about seeing an opportunity in South Africa that was being untapped. Most wine tasting experiences or wine tours tend to be a one-day affair, and I would regard those as slurping experiences. And South Africa had so much to offer that I felt like a multi-day, all-inclusive experience that took in the hotels, the food, the wine tasting, the winemakers, would be something that no one else is doing and would capture a niche. So we did that for a few years, but then unfortunately COVID got in the way and I made the decision to pause the business. But it was great. So I gather you haven't been to South Africa, but I would strongly recommend to yourself and everybody that's watching the video. It's a fantastic place to go to, and invest a few days in the Cape Winelands. Start as your base in Cape Town, but then venture out to places like Stellenbosch and Franschhoek, Elgin, Hermanus, and many other wine regions. So that's my South African experience.
And that's a great hint. I think I start to think when I start to do a little bit wine travel across Europe, I start to understand that the wine grapes and wineries never exist in some ugly places. So it's always amazing natural places with kind of agritourismus around, with a lot of bio, nice food, meat, plants, whatever, greens. So cheese always accompany local ones. So I think it's a great hint for the people. If you want to go and see the real great natural place, go to the winery of the region, and then you will see it all. And
yeah, I agree.
one
I
quick
agree with you.
Bordeaux blend. Actually, for me, it's a new thing that I'm learning from you. It is primarily composed of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc, with smaller portions of Malbec and Petit Verdot. For me, Petit Verdot is the new grape. I never tried it.
Yeah, you're right. So Malbec is the one, and then Cabernet Franc. So just a little bit of a story about Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc is the mother grape to both Cabernet Sauvignon and Sauvignon Blanc, right? But it's a very aromatic red, but it can be a little too acidic, and so Cabernet Sauvignon tends to have a better flavor profile and tends to be more popular. Malbec, as you probably tasted, it's very famous from Argentina. It's a very full-blooded red, quite powerful. And a Petit Verdot, I suppose the way it's described, petite, it's a very delicate, lighter style of red, and it's ideal for blending. You very rarely see it as a straight varietal. It tends to be used as a blend. Cabernet Merlot is popular. Cabernet Malbec is popular. So you can get a sense of how each of those grape varietals tend to have some synergy that work very well together.
Interesting. So South Africa is amazing. We now know more about it as well. If we move to your motherland, like Australia, and I think very interesting New Zealand, you already mentioned. To be honest with you, whatever I tried from New Zealand, I think it was very commercial wines. It was over all the world I traveled, or here. I don't think we have some unique hidden gems to find here, but always it was great quality, aromatic, fruity wines. I start to hear from the local producers who probably want to sell also more Austrian or Slovak Sauvignon Blanc that last years the scene of the winemakers, commercial ones in New Zealand especially, that they start to put more unnatural aroma to the flavor, and that's why it's so intensive. I don't know, is it right or not what they say?
Well, I haven't heard that before, but if someone's adding something to impart aromas, I'm not sure that's a great thing, because you do want your wine to be something natural. The reality is, for whatever reason, New Zealand wines do tend to be very aromatic. Now, maybe it's the cool climate environment. I think the two standout varietals for New Zealand are Pinot Noir and Sauvignon Blanc. Now, if you think about both of those, regardless of where you would get a Pinot from, any country in the world, Pinot by its definition is a very aromatic wine. Right? It tends to be lighter bodied, but it's very fragrant and it's very fruit driven. And New Zealand excels in Pinot. In fact, I know the French will say they make the best Pinot in the world. I haven't tried all the French Pinot, but honestly, on a global scale, New Zealand Pinot is right up with the best. This is my favorite New Zealand Pinot, Barley. Barley. This comes from Central Otago in the South Island. It's down towards the bottom of the South Island. So you can imagine it's actually very close to where the ski fields are. And those wines are not only aromatic and fruity, but they've got body. A lot of Pinot can have the first two qualities, but then it doesn't have any depth, any body. And the great thing about a lot of the New Zealand Pinots is they've got that last quality, which is absolutely essential. Now, this one is a young one's 2020, but I've got 2008 in the cellar, and they're still drinking superbly. So they also have the ability to age. There's one other thing I just wanted to touch on before I forget, because you don't see a lot of this in Europe, because Europe is wedded to corks. Now, whether it's Australian Chardonnay or whether it's a New Zealand Pinot, just about all of our wine now is finished in screw cap, or what we call Stelvin.
Very same to Austria, very same.
Yeah,
and there's find anything else in Austria. I mean, you will find, but most will be the same cork.
Well, that's true. We'll see it in cork.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, This what you're
Oh,
showing,
screw
the
cap.
same. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
And there's a very good reason for it. Australia was actually the global pioneer for screw caps or Stelvins. And it was really driven out of the fact that we were struggling with getting longevity out of some of our white wines, in particular Riesling and Semillon. Now, in Australia, where's the Riesling? Semillon. Up until about 2000, whether it's Riesling or whether it's Semillon, these wines were bottled under cork. And what we were finding was that the longevity of the wines was getting impaired. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's say you ordered 12 bottles of your wine. You would find across those 12 bottles over the period that you drank them, and there would be no consistency in the flavor profile. Some were great, some were good, some were average, some were poor. They were lacking freshness. And the other thing we were finding was that they weren't going the distance. And what I mean by that is a great Semillon or a great Riesling can easily last 20 years. But some of these were falling over within 10. So during the 1970s and 1980s, a couple of Australia's leading wine critics pioneered the testing, and a couple of Australia's leading vineyards pioneered the testing of screw cap. And they did a side-by-side bottling under cork and under screw cap. And the differences were astounding, and they did them over many, many years. And over time, they presented those results and also got winemakers to try the results. And by the year 2000, the industry had begun to shift to screw cap. And I would say by 2005, almost every wine made in New Zealand and Australia went to screw cap. And the real benefits for screw cap, and I mean, I've got over 2,000 bottles in my cellar. The great thing about screw cap is you have assured consistency of what you're going to taste bottle to bottle. Okay? You don't get that with cork. This assures freshness. And what that means is, unfortunately with cork, because it's a natural substance, it's not impervious to air. And when you get air into a bottle of wine, even minute quantities, it can affect the flavor profile and the freshness. So having this thing sealed from the elements ensures that the wine stays fresh, crisp, and sound. And the other thing is they just taste better. They really do taste better. So we've been very lucky here in Australia and New Zealand that our industry and our winemakers have responded to the need to deliver great quality wines, and it starts with things like corks. You may or may not have read that it's quite common for 5 or 6% of wines made under cork to be faulty. Now, faulty could mean it's undrinkable, or it could be slightly tarnished, or somewhere between that. And you don't want to do that. Wine's not cheap. You want to make sure when you open a bottle of wine that you're going to be assured of the flavor. And there's a lot of what I would regard as rubbish being talked about in the press about, well, there's this glamour and aura of popping a cork out of a bottle. Well, I don't really subscribe to that, because I think once you've taken a bottle out of the cellar or out of the fridge, you want to put it in the glass as quickly as possible. So cracking the screw cap is nice and easy. But what's the point of having glamour and aura if you pull the cork out and then you go, oh my God, the wine is off. Now I have to throw that out and get another bottle of wine. So,
and sorry to interrupt, for what Mike now describing, for those who don't know, it's exactly the moment when you order the wine in the restaurant and they going with the glass for you the first to try. You try exactly for that. And actually I was like, I was thinking, every time it's good, and then last year it's happened to me that we have a birthday of my wife, in kind of Tyrol area in the Italy, and we were in the Michelin restaurant, which was a lot of wines coming accompanied with the food. And one of those was exactly this. I tried. I can't drink it. They said sorry. Yeah, we changed. So for me, it happened last year that there was. I think it was because of cork. I don't know, but it was totally
Oh,
ugly taste.
I'm sure it was because of the cork, and you just don't want to take that risk. I'll give you some personal examples. I bought Dom Perignon. Unfortunately, Dom Perignon, as much as it's a fantastic champagne, probably has the worst corks made on earth. And I've opened up bottles which are bordering on undrinkable, and it's because of the cork. Now, there have been some developments in the last 10 or 15 years with a new product called DM, which is a highly, how do I describe it? It's a cork that is granulated and made under extreme pressure. And the idea of those corks is because they've been sealed under very high pressure and everything has been condensed, that the chances of any problems arising with that cork are eliminated. And I would say it's been a huge improvement, and a lot of French champagne is now using DM. And I think a lot of winemakers in Europe are starting to use DM. They won't tell you there was a problem with the cork, but they've quietly made the change to DM because they've recognized that the problem was the cork. I've had conversations with winemakers in South Africa who are still putting wine in cork, and they unfortunately are still wedded to it, and I think it's to their own detriment. So it's an interesting situation with something so important. But there are other factors that are critical. Storing wine at the right temperature. So frankly, anything below 15 degrees, you could do it a little bit more, but as long as it's cool and it's consistent. You don't want temperatures going from 5 degrees to 25 degrees, depending on the time of year, because that puts stress on the wine. It also, if they're under cork, puts stress on the cork because it'll expand and contract. The other thing is light. You want to make sure that where you're storing your wine bottles are in darkness, particularly for things like champagne. There's a phenomenon, well, you can't really see it in this bottle, and I'll talk about this in a moment, but a lot of champagne is bottled in very light colors, light green, and you can then go to a shop and they're being displayed in bright light, and they can have an effect which is called, they have been light struck. The light will actually change the composition of the wine and will make it worse. So often that's why you see French champagne in boxes. That's part of the reason why they want to keep it away from light. So there are a lot of simple things you can do to make sure that whatever you enjoy, you give it the best chance of performing as best as possible. Shall we talk a little bit about Australian wine?
I think we must.
Okay. Well, I live in Sydney. We're very blessed. We have wine growing regions all over Australia, even from northern states like Queensland, which are, in summer, we're talking 35 degrees, and even in winter, it's not uncommon to have temperatures well above 20 degrees Celsius. So they're warm climates. But then you can go right down to Tasmania, which are pretty much in line with cool climate wine regions in New Zealand. And then we go across to Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria. So we have hundreds of wine regions spread all over the country. They're all predominantly positioned along the coastline or near the coast, relatively close to the coastline. I would say within at least half an hour to an hour's drive of the coast, and some of them are almost on the coast. The varietals that are particularly popular here in Australia, we excel at, and we're very lucky because we have such a diverse climate. We can pretty much grow any varietal on earth here. I'll give you an example. We are now producing outstanding Grüner Veltliner. Now, that's the home of Austria, but I've tasted Grüner Veltliner from Austria and Australia, and I must say, I think the Australian ones are every bit as good as what I enjoyed in Austria and Vienna. But the most popular wines, varietals are Chardonnay and Shiraz for reds, and for whites, Riesling, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and then one that I think Australia produces better than anyone else in the world is Semillon. Semillon is one of these grapes that actually does very well in warmer climates. And the other thing it does is it ages exceptionally well. When it's first bottled, it tends to be rather neutral in flavor. But this one is, for example, 2005. This is just starting to hit its strides. So this is 18 years old, and this probably has another 10 to 15 years ahead of it. And what happens with these wines is they develop complexity, toastiness, those brioche qualities, a beautiful golden color, the aromas build. These wines are absolutely outstanding with seafood and oysters. And this region, the Hunter Valley, is 2 hours drive from Sydney. And we do make Semillon in other locations around Australia, but the Hunter Valley is universally known as the best wine region for Semillon. The other varietal we produce outstanding wines are dry Rieslings. And we make dry Riesling pretty much in most parts of the country, but the exceptional wine regions are in South Australia and places like Eden Valley and Clare Valley and Adelaide Hills, but also in Victoria and places like the Grampians and also down in Tasmania. The other one that we are becoming universally known for is outstanding Chardonnay. This comes from Western Australia in an area called Margaret River. And Margaret River, I did bring a bottle. Margaret River is known really for 2 varietals, outstanding Chardonnay, and the other one is incredible Cabernet. And this one's a Cabernet Merlot. But again, you can see there's a bit of Bordeaux blend in this one, right? And those wines are world-class, absolutely, no doubt. This wine now is over $100 a bottle, and though this is a Magnum, this is about $150 for a standard size bottle. So they're not cheap, and they have gone up a lot in price, but they're outstanding. And then Australia's most famous wine. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. Grange Hermitage by Penfolds.
Is it sort of cuvée?
No, this is a red wine. This is a Shiraz.
Shiraz.
Sometimes it has a little bit of Cabernet, but it's predominantly a Shiraz. Now, this is a 1989. This wine began being made in the 1950s by the chief winemaker for Penfolds. Penfolds are the most famous vineyard in Australia. The retail price now for the current release of Grange is $1,000, and the price for some of the wines that were produced in the 1950s are over $50,000 a bottle, and they're very highly sought after. These wines are not something you drink in the first 10 years. You really need to give them some time. They probably don't hit their straps for another 20 to 30 years. So that's probably Australia's most famous wine. And then there are 2 others that I wanted to talk about. This is a wine region in South Australia called Coonawarra. This is Wynn's Coonawarra This is actually 1990, so this is 33 years old. It's still drinking beautifully. And this is probably the most
the name
famous.
sounds like Irish or Celt kind of like whiskey brand name.
Well, maybe I'd have to find out. But if you look at the back label, you can see picture of where in South Australia it comes from. But this is probably Australia's most famous Cabernet, and that is 33 years old. And then there's a couple of others I wanted to talk about very briefly. This comes from a region just outside of Canberra, which is in New South Wales, which is very close to our capital of Australia. And this is a Shiraz Viognier. Now, this is a blend. A Viognier is a white wine. So you say, what, you're blending a white wine with a red wine? Well, actually, the French developed that technique, and Australia have copied that, and it works very well. The Viognier, for some reason, just seems to flesh out and create additional depth to wines. And this is probably Australia's most famous Shiraz Viognier. That's about $120 a bottle. This one's 2009, so it's probably more like 200 now. And then I'm going to finish with Australia's most distinctive wine, which is called the Sparkling Shiraz. So think of champagne, think of cava, right? Think of Vouvray. This is a sparkling wine made out of Shiraz. And have a look at the top. The top is done out of what we call a crown seal, but effectively it's a beer bottle top. And then it's dressed that way. And Australia we don't do this universally, but this is another response to bad corks. And this does a fantastic job of sealing the wines. Now, these wines tend to be drunk at 2 times of the year. Christmas time, which is a bit surprising because it's on the weekend it was 42 degrees here, but at Christmas time it'll probably be 30 degrees. You say, well, why would you want to drink a red in that sort of heat? But a sparkling red is absolutely delicious to have. And the other time is when we celebrate Christmas in July, when it's cold or colder, and it's absolutely a delightful drink. And there are vineyards all over Australia that are making sparkling Shiraz, and it's a wine that ages exceptionally well. This is 2018, and this is probably another 10 or 20 years of good drinking ahead of it. So that's, I suppose, a quick story of some of the wines and some of the things that I love, and hopefully I've shared some insights into my passion for wine. There's so much to discover. But living in a place like Australia and being exposed to wines from all over the world, but also across Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa means that there's never a dull moment when you're looking for a good bottle of wine to drink.
Yeah, thank you very much for your insights. I think it was an amazing story also on the bridge from the South Africa to Australia, which is very interesting for our region because, as I said, we have not a lot of choice from those regions. I mean, more commercialized wines. As we discussed with you, that it might be an issue to order something via post to you and back, or from me to you, right? But I'm sure it's a very inspiring conversation also for those who want to visit, to have a wine tourism or just a tourism, but to dedicate one day for great sightseeing and wine tasting and discover something new.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would say every year, my wife and I would go to 2 or 3 wine regions every year. We do that because it's not just about the vineyards. It's about an opportunity to have a holiday in nice surroundings, eat some good food, drink some great wine, and experience some countryside. So it's absolutely fantastic. So we're very blessed. I think the other thing that we're very fortunate to have here in Australia is we have so many wine shows and we have many wine critics. So am constantly receiving reviews from well-known wine critics, which are published, and then the online retailers will embed those reviews of the wines in their emails to you. So we're very well informed here. And we have a very competitive wine market as a result, where the retailers really are competing for your dollar. And although wine is reasonably taxed here in Australia, I think we still get great value and great choice. So we're very fortunate.
So again, thank you very much for this interview. I hope someone will find something new and discover some new stuff. Thank you.
Well, I hope so. Hopefully they found it entertaining and informative. I tried to do that by covering a variety of different things. So anyway, my advice to everyone is go out and seek some vineyards, enjoy the experience, see what sort of email marketing is available to learn more about wine, and try something different every time you go to the bottle shop, because that's how you build your palate and your preferences.
And I would say have courage to try something outside of the typical Lidl, Kaufland, Carrefour, or whatever you use. Go and try something outside of commercial stuff.
Absolutely. Go outside your comfort zone. Worst thing you can say was, well, that was okay. I may not buy it again. Or you could say, that was a great discovery. Why didn't I try this a long time ago? So I agree. So Alexei, it was really good to join you on today's video.
Thank you. My pleasure. Keep in touch.